Hello, thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Victoria Field. I am the co-founder of Metabolic Health Initiative and co-host of Metabolic Health Summit, a scientific conference dedicated entirely to the very latest science on metabolic health and metabolic-based therapies. It is Mental Health Month, and we need to talk about this topic. It is so incredibly important. I mean, 1 in 5 Americans right now, nearly 1 in 5, those numbers have probably changed since the pandemic, but 1 in 5 are suffering from a mental illness. There's a really good chance somebody you know, maybe yourself, maybe your friend, maybe your mom, maybe struggles with mental health issues. And it's something that's not talked often enough about. And so that's why I'm so thrilled to be bringing on a pioneer in the space of metabolic therapy and mental illness, Dr. Chris Palmer. Now, Dr. Palmer has been a speaker at Metabolic Health Summit before. You might have seen him on our channels. We've interviewed him, and we're bringing him back again because he really is leading the charge in this field of nutritional psychiatry, and it's such an important topic. To give you a little bit of backstory on Dr. Palmer, he is the director of the Department of Postgraduate and Continuing Education at McLean Hospital and an assistant professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. He's actually been a practicing psychiatrist for 25 years, and for much of that time, he's been involved in psychiatric research. However, most recently, his research focus has sort of shifted to areas of metabolism, metabolic disorders, and their connection to mental illness. And he says those connections are widespread and span across numerous mental and metabolic disorders. And I am really excited to be speaking with him today because this is a topic that we need to open up the conversation about and really explore the potential of nutrition alongside standard of care therapy. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Chris Palmer. Thank you, Dr. Palmer, so much for joining me today to cover this important topic. I'm thrilled to be seeing you again and excited to kick off this conversation.
Thank you, Victoria, for having me and for inviting me. And as you know, this is a topic I'm really passionate about, so I'm always more than happy to talk about it.
Yes, no, it's so incredibly important. And to kind of kick things off, first of all, we've had quite the year and a half, I'll say, and I cannot imagine what that's been like being a psychiatrist. I mean, we were dealing with a mental health crisis before COVID-19, and I can't imagine what it's now done, to sort of our country as a whole and our mental well-being. Can you talk a little bit more about what you've observed since this pandemic started and what your experience has been like as a mental health provider?
Yeah, no, it is a huge topic and huge problem, not just here in the United States, but around the world. I'll speak more to the statistics in the United States because we have those statistics, but by no means do these apply only to the US. And in some countries, I think they're probably even worse than what I'm going to mention. But there's no question that the past year and a half has taken a huge mental health toll on the population. The CDC has been tracking mental health statistics, especially in the form of depression, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance use, and suicidality. Those in particular. They've been tracking those on a monthly basis, actually, since about May or June of last year. And in June was the first time that we got a really good population representative survey of what was happening to the mental health of the people of the United States. And it was shocking to everybody in the mental health community. At that point in time, it was a little more than 40% of the entire population surveyed met criteria for depression, an anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, or a substance use disorder.
Wow.
When they also asked people in that survey in the last 30 days, have you seriously thought about killing yourself? 11% of the entire survey population said yes.
Oh my gosh.
That is shocking and alarming and disturbing, to say the least. The unfortunate news is that this is primarily affecting the younger population. And the 18 to 24-year-olds in that particular survey, they weren't surveying people younger than 18. So the 18 to 24-year-olds in that survey, their rates of depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance use were even higher. And when they asked them the question, have you seriously considered killing yourself in the last 30 days? 25% said yes. 1 in 4 young people were seriously considering it. Now, a lot of people think, well, that was back then. That was June. That was, we were only a few months into it. People have gotten better. People have sucked it up. Everybody's gotten used to it. Like they're coping. They've figured it out. They've figured out a new normal, right? No, unfortunately, the CDC is tracking these statistics on a monthly basis, and they are staying about the same, but trending higher. They're probably about 5% higher than they were even then. And just to kind of share this information with people, I'm not talking about just mild anxiety or mild depression. Certainly, the majority of people only have mild forms of symptoms, but the people who had severe depression, when we compare it to the pre-pandemic levels in 2018 and 2019, the people with severe depression are up 5-fold, a 500% increase. People with moderate depression, similar increase. And so people with severe depression are people who are suicidal. They are people who can't get out of bed. They can't function. They can't think straight. They can't apply to jobs. They can't do their laundry sometimes. I mean, they are severely impaired because they've basically given up on living and they don't see any point in going on. So tragically, even though the rates of mental illness have skyrocketed with the pandemic, to add insult to injury, like getting a psychiatrist or a therapist or any mental health professional prior to the pandemic was extraordinarily difficult. For anybody who's tried, it's extraordinarily difficult.
Right.
Half the psychiatrists in the United States won't take any insurance. So that means you got to pay cash out of pocket for service. And just finding, even with that caveat, even if you've got cash to pay, finding a psychiatrist who's taking new patients was next to impossible prior to the pandemic. And the statistics were about 50% of people with serious mental disorders didn't get any mental health service at all because it's just next to impossible to find a mental health provider. Well, with the pandemic, most mental health professionals went remote, and we were kind of forced to go remote. And that means that the mental health professionals are now also trying to work from home. They might have been homeschooling their kids. They may have suffered from COVID themselves, or they may have had a family member who suffered from COVID themselves. And so the overall trend is that mental health professionals have been seeing fewer patients during this pandemic. So what was already a horrible crisis, what was already like this very hard to access clinical care, all of that got worse with the pandemic as the demand or the need for mental health services skyrocketed. Now, a lot of people are thinking, well, we're in the home stretch. We're in the home stretch. We're almost out of the woods. We got the vaccine rolling out. Whatever you think of the vaccine has rolled out. Rates are declining dramatically. Rates of hospitalization, rates of death from COVID, all of those things are getting better. So mandates are being lifted. We're getting rid of masks. We're starting to go back to normal. So a lot of people make the assumption that, oh, well, since we're going back to normal, all these people will pull it together and be fine again. Like as soon as, if the cause of their depression or anxiety or PTSD or alcoholism was the pandemic, well, now that the pandemic's over, that stuff will just go away on its own, right?
Like it's just magic.
Unfortunately, no. Those things will not. I think for some people, especially the people with mild disorders, in fairness, I think a lot of people, the majority of people even, will get better. They will no longer meet criteria for an anxiety disorder or mild depression, because as they are allowed to go back to society, as they are allowed to go back to work, see friends, hug people, all of that will be enough for them. And they won't have a diagnosable disorder anymore. But there are a lot of people, like this 5-fold increase in people with severe depression. Once those things get started, or something like addiction to alcohol or opioids or whatever, once that gets started, stopping the pandemic doesn't stop those things. They take on a life of their own. And now these people have a serious problem, and they are going to need help getting over it. And we really, we pay a lot of lip service to mental health. We have Mental Health Month, and everybody talks about mental health campaign stuff. But again, the fact that 50% of people with serious mental disorders, not just mild ones, serious ones, that are incapacitated by their disorders, don't get any mental health service at all. We as a country don't take mental health as seriously as we should. And we certainly don't, even though we have laws that supposedly make it, on par with medical diagnoses, just because it's a law doesn't mean it's actually implemented or enforced. And so the reality is a lot of people with mental health problems can't get help. And the people in their lives don't know how to help them. They're not trained professionals. I guess they shouldn't. But so we're really going to have a crisis. And I'm particularly worried, honestly, about the young people. Not just the teenagers and the young adults, the 18 to 24-year-olds. We have lots of reasons to worry about them. The really young children who, over the last year and a half, have been cooped up in a home. They haven't made friends. They haven't learned how to socialize. They haven't really been getting a decent education. Like being on Zoom when you're in first grade probably isn't all that effective as a form of education. And a lot of times, early education is really more about teaching people how to be with others, how to be respectful, how to cooperate, how to communicate, how to advocate for yourself. Those are really the important skills that young children need to be learning. And they haven't been learning those skills for the last year and a half. And, the rates of mental illness were already skyrocketing in young people prior to the pandemic. This is almost certainly going to make that even worse.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers you just shared and what you just said is just beyond shocking. It's just not okay. It needs, and while you were saying we give mental health a lot of lip service, but more action needs to be taking place. I mean, what you're doing in the space has been incredible, and the voice you provide people who might not have had it before is huge. But what can we kind of do even more so now that we're in a deeper hole than we were prior to the pandemic? And how is that? I mean, I know how passionate you are about this field to begin with, but how has this personally and professionally affected you in seeing this just dramatic increase in need and not, I mean, you're one person. So how is that, what has that been like for you personally to experience and see sort of the devastation going on sort of around you?
I think the only word that comes to my mind is it's heartbreaking. It is,
Yeah.
it is beyond frustrating. It is heartbreaking. Like I've actually, in the last many months in particular, as I reflect on this, I sometimes kind of get kind of negative or pessimistic about the human species, because a lot of this is preventable. A lot of this we could be doing something about. And it's about people taking care of each other. It's about people looking out for each other. We are all different. Every one of us is different. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And we all have periods of strength and resilience. And each and every one of us will have periods of vulnerability when we are down and out for whatever reason. And at the end of the day, each and every one of us will die. So if you think you're invincible, well, guess what? At some point, you're going to be on your deathbed. And that's going to be a point, if not before, when you are weak and vulnerable and depending on other people to take care of you and help you out. And that is just part of being human. And I feel so strongly and passionately that we need to do a better job of stepping up for each other. And this cuts across so many of the issues that, I mean, the political divisiveness that was taking place in the country, and is still taking place in the country, the divisiveness over the pandemic. Should we have to wear masks? Should we not have to wear masks? All the diet wars. Oh my God, plant-based diet, you're a murderer. You people eating meat are murderers. And you plant-based people are wimps, or weak, and it's just so many slurs and so much animosity among human beings. And that affects people. Like, even though you could say, well, if you want to be on Twitter, you gotta be tough. Well, like, why does there have to be so much cruelty? Why does there have, like I'm all for disagreement. I'm all for taking a stand and standing firm, but you can be civil and take a stand. You can be civil and still be firm and still hold to your convictions. I'm not saying we all have to agree with each other, but we could be maybe a little kinder to each other. And the whole issue with race and systemic racism, but there are so many marginalized groups, and certainly the mentally ill I include in that. And it just it's sometimes disheartening. I'm really hoping to change it. I will share with you. So as pessimistic as all of that sounds.
I almost cried. Oh my gosh.
Horrible and pessimistic as all of that sounds, I will share with you that I am hoping to change things. And so stay tuned, because within about a year or year and a half, I'm hoping to really start a movement, actually, for mental health. Similar to the way we had a movement for HIV/AIDS, similar to the way we've had movements for breast cancer. I am very passionate and interested in starting a movement for mental health that will be based on science and logic and new paths going forward to help people.
Wow. Are you able to share a little bit more on that? That's exciting, and it's sort of a breath of fresh air to hear you. I mean, just to touch on what you just talked about, there's a lot there to kind of unpack. And I feel like you and I could have a conversation about the effects of the last year. I mean, it's just, there's been so much distraction, right? There's so much hate. There's been so much swirling around. It's just like, gosh, we just really need to come together right now, regardless of beliefs and things like that. There's just so much we just need to be kind, as you said. We need to be kind, caring. This has taken a toll, and especially those who are already dealing with a mental health condition prior to, and just how isolated and how alone, and maybe, you know, these people are not getting the help that they need. I mean, that's just devastating. So, you know, I could dive into those topics for many days with you, but hearing that you want to take charge in leading a movement, I mean, in my opinion, you already are a huge pioneer in this space of metabolic therapy, which we'll get into in mental health, mental illness. But what are the plans here? Can you share just how, you know, this sounds really hopeful?
I can't share all the details, unfortunately, not yet. I will tell you this, that I'm in the final phases of completing a book that I think has the potential to dramatically alter the paradigm of mental health, the mental health field. And it's based on a lot of this work. That's not going to be a surprise to anybody who's listening to this. It's based on these connections between metabolic disorders and mental disorders. And, you know, metabolic disorders are usually considered physical disorders. Unfortunately, a lot of people see them as simple as weight issues. That metabolism is all about weight, and that's all it's about. And if you weigh too much, then you're going to get diabetes. And if you weigh too much, then you're going to get a heart attack. So if you just lose weight and everything will be fine. In fact, metabolism is so much more than that. That is part of metabolism, but it is so much more than that. And I happen to believe it plays a significant role in mental health. And based on that understanding, I think that there are a lot of new strategies that can be implemented now, like the ketogenic diet, which I've been doing over the last many years. But I think there are additional strategies that can be developed based on kind of a new way of thinking about all of this. And so once I have to wait for that to roll itself out, because that really is the platform. That's kind of the, you know, if you will, it includes the logic, the science, and people need the logic and science. And unfortunately, it's not easy to give in a soundbite other than what I just kind of said. But what I just said is, you know, is kind of ethereal, and people are like, well, what does he mean? Like, what does that mean? And who knows? And but I'm hoping to galvanize troops. And the really good news is that, so I've already had 2 award-winning science journalists review this who are extraordinarily excited about this. I have a large organization that is already ready to support this. Incredibly excited is the words they're using. And there is a philanthropic family, just extraordinarily wealthy, that is very passionate about moving this forward too. And so that means that there are people who don't think I'm crazy.
We don't think you're crazy, for the record.
Most importantly, there are people who don't think I'm crazy, who reviewed the work, who reviewed some of this, and they get it, and they're like, oh my God, yeah, it all makes sense. Yeah, we do need to start a movement. But we also have some people who have resources, who have connections, who are interested in maybe seeing something happen. So even though it sounds like a pie in the sky kind of thing, I'm usually pretty determined to do my best, and I'll go down fighting. Like maybe I'll crash and burn within a month.
It sounds pretty exciting from what you're sharing so far. So you'll definitely have to keep us in the loop on what's happening, because we also don't think you're crazy. And I think you're really leading the charge with a lot of the research that's happening. I mean, Nutritional psychiatry is very much in its infancy still, but you are really pushing in a way that's making some big changes and big waves. So please keep us updated on what's happening in that respect. And, you bring up a really important point in discussing the science. And I think that is something we're so passionate about, keeping at the forefront of what we do. And I know you are very much the same in that regard. And I want to get into, for those who may be just jumping in, and we've kind of been talking a little bit about the pandemic. It's had such a profound effect on just this country as a whole. And we could talk about it for a long time, but I want to get into some of your work involving the ketogenic diet specifically. For those who maybe haven't seen you speak at our conference or the other interviews we've done, which have been incredible. Talk a little bit about, let's take it back a little bit for you, and when you realized ketogenic therapy may actually be a really viable treatment option for even serious mental disorders.
So yeah, I can be long-winded. I'll try to really be concise.
I literally think I could have a conversation with you for a long time. So yeah, but it's an interesting story how it started for you. I know it was very kind of personal initially. So
it was. So I'll whiz through that. So I used a ketogenic diet myself, I think 24 years ago now, to improve my metabolic syndrome. I was in my 20s and already had metabolic syndrome. And I was pretty disciplined. I was on a low-fat diet. I was exercising regularly. I was doing everything supposedly the right way, and it wasn't working out. I did a ketogenic diet, and one of the things that I noticed was a significant change in my sleep quality, in my energy level, my motivation, my cognitive function. And I didn't have a diagnosable disorder at that point. I had struggled with my own mental health issues prior, but at that point in my life, I didn't have depression or an anxiety disorder or anything else. I had gotten through med school. I was working as an intern. So by all standards, I was pretty successful or able to do hard work and perform. And I did really well in medical school. So I certainly wasn't impaired by any stretch of the imagination. And yet I noticed significant improvement. And that got me wondering, I wonder what this might do for some of my patients with serious depression. I'm noticing more motivation, and I didn't really have a major motivation problem. But I wonder what it might do for them. And so it was probably somewhere 15 to 18 years ago now that I started using it in patients with treatment-resistant depression. And lo and behold, some of them absolutely got dramatically better. I was pretty quiet about it then because this is almost 20 years ago. We didn't really have a lot of research documenting the ketogenic diet's efficacy, even for weight loss, let alone for diabetes or anything else. And so it was a very taboo subject, and I didn't want to get fired from my job. So I kind of stayed quiet about it all. And I just did it on my own. And that all changed about 6 years ago now when I had a longstanding patient that I'd been treating for about 8 years with what's called schizoaffective disorder. This was a man who lived with his father still. He was about 30. He had hallucinations and delusions every day. He was tortured by his illness every single day. He had tried, I think it was at least 12 or 14 different medications. None of them really helped his symptoms, but they did cause him to gain over 100 pounds. So he was obese at 340 pounds, and he wanted to lose some weight. So we talked about different options. He had already tried a couple of other weight loss methods. They didn't work. So we decided to try the ketogenic diet. And we ended up going with a more rigorous ketogenic diet. And at that point, I really only intended to help him lose weight. You had asked me at that point, do you think this might help his schizoaffective disorder? I would have said, no way. What are you talking about? Why would a diet help schizoaffective disorder?
Right.
So even
it was never in the same sentence, right? I mean, it wasn't really thought to make a difference.
No, and At that point, we really didn't have, we had one case report from Eric Westman, and then there was one small pilot trial of 10 women from the 1960s. But these were kind of just, relics in our almost archaic kind of, like, nobody talked about them, nobody taught this, nobody even thought of it. It was just, those were just whatever, crazy reports by crazy people.
Yeah, I think the first was like 1965 was the first clinical report, right, on schizophrenia. Yes. But what happened to that? It's interesting.
Well, exactly. And that was on an inpatient unit, and so implementing it can be challenging, and that's one of the challenges in using this in real life is how do you get patients to do the diet? And a lot of clinicians don't know how to do that. Because I have done it now for 20 some years, and I know the ins and outs. I've coached countless people on how to do it. I'm pretty good at getting people to do the diet. And it's not just hardworking, disciplined people. I can get people to do the diet if they are really committed to doing it. But that's the if. They have to be committed to doing it, because it's not always easy. There's going to be a lot of trial and error at first. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to, have weak moments where they're famished and they eat the bagels in the refrigerator or something. And you just, as a clinician, you can't get discouraged by that. You just have to see that as part of the process. That's par for the course. Okay, you ate the bagels. Let's maybe get rid of the bagels for the next round. And like, what else can we get rid of from that kitchen of yours? And so you gotta be pragmatic. So anyway, I help him do this ketogenic diet. Within about 3 weeks, that's when I started noticing significant changes. And the first thing I noticed is that he was a lot less depressed, less sedated. He was making better eye contact, and he was getting a lot more talkative in the sessions that I had with him. And I was kind of like, what's gotten into you? Like, you're coming to life and you got a lot to say. Like, what's going on? I didn't think much of it. But I was noticing, wow, you're really feeling good. Maybe he's just excited that he's losing weight, because he was losing weight. And it was at about the 6 week to 2 month mark where my jaw was dropping, because he just spontaneously started reporting, those voices that I hear all the time, they're kind of going away. I'm not hearing them so much anymore. They're not completely gone. I still hear them like maybe once or twice a day, but they're really soft and I can ignore them now. I never used to be able to ignore them. And now if they start talking to me, I just ignore them. And I've got stuff to do. I've got a life to live. I'm not going to pay attention to them anymore. And then the other big thing is that he had these chronic paranoid conspiracy theories for years. And he was convinced that there were these powerful families who, basically rule the earth. They have all of the money. They have all this technology, and they can control his mind, and they're torturing him. They've targeted him for some reason. He wasn't sure why, but they were just out to get him, out to torture him. And he spontaneously reports, how I thought about, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember. I remember all that. Are we going to talk about that again? And he's like, you know what? I don't think that's really happening. When I say it now, it sounds crazy, doesn't it? And he's like, I don't think that was really happening. I don't think those families are targeting me. Maybe those families don't even exist. Like, maybe I have schizophrenia. Maybe that's why I've had all of these symptoms, and they're going away. So he went on to lose 150 pounds. He is still a patient of mine. He's kept all of that weight off for, over 5 years now. He went on to be able to do a lot of things that he had not been able to do. And that, honestly, it really, for me, initially I was in disbelief. I really was in disbelief. I was almost like, am I imagining this? Am I going crazy? And fortunately, he was being treated by one other clinician more for psychotherapy. And he actually had somebody helping him in the home. So he had a home kind of mental health professional. And then he had his father. And so I'm going to all of these people. Are you guys seeing this? Like, am I crazy? Is he getting like dramatically better? Is this all in my head, or like what's happening? And they're all like, no, we see it too. Like, what the hell is happening? Like, you have him on this diet. Like, what is going on? This is impossible. He's getting so much better. And that, I felt like I can't keep this quiet. Like, even though I'd been doing this work for, at that point for well over 10 years with patients with depression and other disorders, those other disorders, it felt like, well, we have other treatments for those. This is going to sound totally crazy. Nobody's going to believe it. With this one, I really felt compelled. And I ended up using the diet in another existing patient, like Ben, and she too got profoundly better. And I published those 2 case reports as the first step. And in order to publish those case reports, I had to do a deep dive into the science. Like, what do we know about this ketogenic diet? What do we know about its effects on the brain? And at that point, everything started coming together. I was like, oh my God, this science base has been out there, and yet nobody's talking about this. Nobody's been using this treatment. It's an evidence-based epilepsy treatment, and we use epilepsy treatments all the time, every day in psychiatry. Like, why isn't anybody doing anything with this? This really makes a lot of sense. That was extraordinarily helpful in getting everything published. Nobody would have published my reports if I didn't have that database. If I had instead come to them saying something like, and I don't mean this to be inflammatory, but if I had said carnivore diet or vegan diet or any other dietary intervention for schizophrenia, and I'm seeing profound improvement, it wouldn't have gotten published in any reputable psychiatric journal, because there's no logical evidence base to support why on earth anybody should even take that seriously. So in a way, I was really lucky that that I could climb right up on the shoulders of all these pioneers who've been doing this work for decades, and shout out from their shoulders, hey, everybody, guess what? It might help mental health problems too. So I was just lucky that all of those people had done all of that pioneering work so that I could connect the dots pretty easily.
Yeah. Lucky, determined, passionate. I mean, there's a lot of words I would use to describe you and what you've done since then. While we have this whole sort of area of research over the last 100 years, specifically as it pertains to epilepsy, it takes a lot of guts to be able to, and we've talked about this before, but it takes a lot of guts to be able to take something that's not, nutrition has not really been thought to. That I think up until recently, people have been like, the mind is disconnected from the body, right? And so now you're taking this information, actually implementing it into your practice, providing it as a potential option for many of your patients. That takes a lot of guts when it's not currently a part of sort of standard of care for mental health. But that could change. And I think what's interesting, you brought up a little bit of information on diabetes, weight loss, things along those lines. So I want to kind of dive into that, because the ketogenic diet, ketogenic therapy is sort of thought to target many of the neurometabolic features that are thought to be sort of associated with a variety of mental illnesses. So let's kind of dive into a little bit more about, obviously there's a lot of work and research to be done in this area, but talk a little bit about what you think are sort of the mechanisms of action and what's at play here when implementing ketogenic therapy for mental health.
It's a great question, and it's a really important one. And unfortunately, the answer is not a simple one.
Right.
Everybody wants simple answers. And so I'm just going to let you know up front, you're not going to get one. Sorry.
We can get into the weeds. Our audience likes the weeds, so it's cool.
So the easiest answer, the easiest overarching answer is essentially to basically repeat what you kind of said, which is, I believe that that metabolism or metabolic problems play a role, and a significant role, at least for some people, in their mental health. And the ketogenic diet is a metabolic intervention. I like to call it an intervention or a therapy as opposed to a diet, because everybody thinks of a diet as something you do to lose weight. And therefore, if you call it a diet, it's, well, how does losing weight, what is that? So I can go to Weight Watchers and cure my schizophrenia? It's like, no, I didn't say that. I can do a vegan diet and cure my schizophrenia? No, I didn't say that either. So I like to use the word intervention or therapy. But when you think about mechanisms of action, then you have to start asking yourself, well, what is metabolism? And as soon as you ask yourself, what is metabolism, most people really have no clue what metabolism is. Most people think of metabolism as burning calories or burning fat. And if you have a high metabolism, you can eat a lot and be skinny. And if you have a low metabolism, you get fat, even if you don't eat too much. And
if it were only that simple, right?
Yeah, that's what metabolism is. Metabolism is all about burning calories and fat, and whether you can eat a lot or not. In fact, I would say metabolism is the study of biological life forms. Because at the end of the day, that is what life forms biology is. It's the study of how we take energy and use it to build things, to build proteins, to build membranes, to fuel life, to fuel the function of cells, to all of those things. So metabolism is extraordinarily complicated. And so when we think about metabolic therapies, they too are extraordinarily complicated. The beautiful thing about the ketogenic diet is that the ketogenic diet is in many ways synonymous with fasting, with going without food. The challenge with going without food is that people can starve. It can quickly turn into what we call starvation, and you can die from starvation. So you don't want to go without food for a super prolonged period of time. So the ketogenic diet is beautiful because you can mimic that fasting state and still get a lot of the same benefits, but not starve to death. The nice thing about the ketogenic diet is that it taps into a lot of different mechanisms of action. But the way that I think about it at the end of the day is it's really almost tapping into your body's innate ability to heal itself. That's what you're really doing. You're stimulating a lot of processes that our bodies already have programmed into them that can actually heal the human body. But you just have to turn those signals on. And if you turn those signals on at the right time in the right way, and they do have to be turned on at the right time in the right way, and it has to be in the right context. Because I certainly don't want to imply that like fasting or ketogenic diets will cure everything. For example, once cells die, like once your brain cells die, they're dead. The ketogenic diet is not going to resurrect them. But it can help struggling cells that are almost dying or that are on a path to dying. It can help revitalize them. So it is a powerful treatment, but it's not a cure-all for every human ailment. And we're all going to die. Like I said before, we're all going to die. Ketogenic diet is not going to prevent that.
Oh, that I see. This whole time I thought, just kidding.
We're
Yeah, that's
all
unfortunate, but yes, no, very true.
so
But we just don't tap into that metabolic state, right? Many of us, at least, don't really use this innate resource that we have at our disposal. And, I think that it's just this missed opportunity of being able to we're kind of all like hybrid cars. I sort of look at it like, we've got the ability to use these different energy fuel sources as sort of like the primary, but we don't really take advantage of it. And so that's where you can maybe find some benefit. But yeah, no, I think it's very complex topic diving into some of these sort of mechanisms of action. I mean, there's so many that are sort of going on, and there's so much research that needs to be done around that still. And I think we're just kind of cracking the surface, really.
Well, and so for people who want a quick list, I'll give you a quick list. So quick list, a lot of people are aware of insulin. Insulin has profound effects on brain function. This is particularly highlighted in Alzheimer's disease. People are calling it type 3 diabetes. Well, same findings, exact same findings in a lot of mental disorders. So it's usually called glucose hypometabolism, which basically, they're not necessarily linking it directly to insulin, but it almost certainly is linked with insulin, or at least the ability to use glucose as a fuel source. And certainly diagnoses like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, but even chronic depression and even alcoholism have been associated with what's called glucose hypometabolism. And the ketogenic diet provides an alternate fuel source, but it also sensitizes the insulin system, the receptors, the levels of insulin, all of that. Over time, it will sensitize all of that and get that functioning at a normal level again. There are changes in the gut microbiome that we know occur, and there are some researchers who passionately believe that is the primary mechanism of action of the ketogenic diet. Ketone bodies themselves are not just a fuel source, they are a signaling molecule. They result in epigenetic changes. They result in broad changes in metabolism. Ketogenic diet lowers inflammation, which we know is linked with a lot of mental illnesses. Ketogenic diet in its epilepsy version and all the research, we know that it changes neurotransmitter levels, it changes ion channels, and those have been directly linked not only with epilepsy, but also with most psychiatric disorders. So rebalancing the chemical imbalance. I'll stop there, but those are like some of the mechanisms of action. My honest guess is that most of those are interrelated with each other. It's not just the microbiome. And this is the thing that gets frustrating for people. Because when I say, oh, it's a change in the microbiome, everybody then asks me, so what's a probiotic that I can take instead of doing this crazy ketogenic diet? And I'm like, well, changing your gut microbiome is actually quite complicated, number one. You have trillions of microorganisms in that gut of yours with tens of thousands of different species of bacteria. And you think taking one species of bacteria that we call a probiotic is going to miraculously solve everything?
There's no pill that fixes it all, Dr. Palmer. I'm bummed to hear that,
I'm sorry to be such a bummer.
It's interesting though, how complex it really is, but how there's so many like little pieces of connections that we're seeing between all of these sort of just brain health in general. I mean, you talking about Alzheimer's, even traumatic brain injury and what happens with sort of this dysregulation in glucose metabolism with that and inefficiency to use glucose, right? So there's all of these like threads that, obviously we have a lot of work to do, but I think it's exciting to see where this is taking us. And we've got all this history with epilepsy and there's some common features that are shared there. I mean, like you just said, you use many epilepsy-based focused drugs in psychiatric conditions. So it's no wonder that the ketogenic diet, which works in epilepsy, may also work in mental health, right? So it's really interesting. So I want to know, we've not really dived into this part as much in our previous conversations. You use a ketogenic diet with your patients in your practice, many of your patients. In terms of like what you've seen in that shift when you're dealing with treatment resistant cases, and you provide them with something like this sort of option. Number one, what does that option kind of look like? Because obviously there's very many different forms of a ketogenic diet. And two, once they implement that, when maybe they didn't have options before, what kind of impact does that shift have on your patients in terms of, I mean, I can only imagine in terms of empowerment, what that does.
Yeah, so I'll start with what it looks like, and that is highly variable, even in my practice. And the reason it's variable is because different people are coming to me with different resources and different capacities, and I have to meet them where they're at. So if I had my druthers, and if I had unlimited resources, so people told me, I don't care about budget, like hiring a ketogenic dietitian, for instance, is not covered by insurance. It is not covered by insurance. It isn't, sorry. But if I had my druthers, everybody would have a ketogenic dietitian, because that would save me a lot of time. And then I
honestly don't know how you manage it all, to be honest. Yeah.
I don't have to do all the education and coaching and everything else and detective work. So when they come in and aren't in ketosis, ketogenic dietitians are like, detective.
Are you working with one at all? Are you able to do a bit of a collaboration there? Okay.
I am. There are a couple of ketogenic dietitians that I do routinely work with, and they work remotely, so that works well. So when patients are able to pay out of pocket for that service, I almost always I always strongly recommend it. And with most people, especially nowadays, I'm just too busy to be able to do all the education and the monitoring and everything, that I almost always require it anymore, unfortunately. But I still have some existing patients that have been patients of mine for a long time who don't have the money for a ketogenic dietitian. They struggle with buying groceries. They don't have a lot of money for anything. And they're impoverished because they have a disabling illness. And so I have to try to meet them where they're at and try to figure out, well, what can we do? I'm not going to send them for bottles of MCT oil because they usually can't afford it. So with them, I'm shooting more for a modified Atkins diet kind of prescription, where we're not going to closely monitor and strictly kind of go for specific ratios, but we're gonna go for, low carb diet, Atkins-ish diet, and then I want you to add fat whenever you can. Add some butter, add some olive oil, add some of this, add some of that. But with other patients, if I had my druthers, I would probably start them on a 2-to-1 to 3-to-1 ratio ketogenic diet, depending on the illness that we're treating. The results are, it's interesting, because I will say up front, the diet doesn't work for everybody. So I have a patient with longstanding chronic depression. He went on the diet for 3 months. Because of the pandemic, I couldn't see him in person, so I couldn't measure his blood ketones. He didn't have the money to buy a monitor, so but we had urine ketone strips, and he was like trace to moderate at best, probably pretty low ketones, and I usually go for higher than that. But other people in this field say it doesn't matter. Ketosis is like pregnancy; it's yes or no. I actually disagree with that myself, but there are some experts in our field, in the keto community, who say, no, any level of ketosis should work. Well, for him, 3 months of that level of ketosis did not work. I will just say that was my observation. If I had my druthers, again, he would have been working with a dietitian. He didn't have money for that. He would have, we would have been monitoring blood levels. He didn't have money for that. I couldn't do it because of the pandemic. But he's a case that I'm going to count as it didn't work, for better or worse. Another recent case that I've had, that patient's been on the diet for about 5 to 6 months now. And I get reports both from him and from family members. This is nothing short of miraculous. He says, oh my God, for the first time in years, I feel like now I can actually live a normal life. Like, I'm going to be able to have a normal life. I didn't think that was possible. He
Oh my
had,
gosh, that gives you chills. Like, I mean, as a physician, I can't imagine what that's like to hear after maybe even years of treating a patient and then them finally sort of turning this corner after nutrition therapy. I mean, that has got to be life-changing for not only the patient, but for you as well, I would think.
it is. And honestly, when I heard that, like, mother was beside herself with, delight, and he obviously was so delighted. There was a part of me that was really kind of sad when I heard that, because I'm like, yes, I get it. You've had a devastating illness and now you can finally be normal and live a normal life. But the part of me that was sad was like, that's what we like fought like hell to achieve, is just so you can be quote unquote normal. Not so you can like be some super happy, successful, like, we're just going for normal. Just normal would be like a miracle. And for him, that's what it was. Just the opportunity to live a normal life is nothing short of a miracle. And I think it just, the sad part, the reason that makes me sad is because there are tens of millions of people with these illnesses who know that their reality is they don't get to live a normal life. They have this illness that has affected them. They don't know why. They don't know what to do about it. Nobody's helping them. The treatments that we're offering them are not curing them, are not putting their symptoms in remission. They have no other option right now. They're just going on life, accepting that everybody else gets to live a normal life except me.
I can't imagine that at all. And I mean, that's why this is so important. And that's why your work is so important, to at least be able to get to a place where maybe mental health providers are sort of on this common ground of providing nutrition as a potential option alongside standard of care. Like you said, maybe it's not going to work for everybody, and it probably won't work for everybody, but at least providing that option, much like with epilepsy, right? With refractory epilepsy patients where drugs fail, maybe starting the conversation with food first and seeing where we go. But I mean, the incredible stories that you've had, and many of which have been published. So if you're watching this, you can actually read some of these case studies that Dr. Palmer has actually published, which are incredible, including you also just recently in 2020 put together a couple of incredible research articles and reviews that are in our ebook too, which you can find and read more about there, which I think are just phenomenal in letting people know where we're at so far and where we have to go from here.
And thank you for spreading the word and spreading the work.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for the work that you do. It's so incredibly important. And sometimes it feels like there's just so few, the field of nutritional psychiatry is fairly small, but it's exploding. I feel like it's starting to gain some momentum, and largely in part for people like you. So thank you for that. I want to talk about something to kind of, I could literally talk to you about this topic for days, but I want to talk to you about something that's really important as we kind of, go through this conversation, in that, maybe there's some people watching this that are suffering from depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and are looking at this like, wow, I didn't realize that this could be an option. Please, though, talk about the importance of working alongside a healthcare provider if you're even kind of considering using ketogenic therapy as a potential option alongside whatever standard of care treatments you're going through. Because I think that's really important. And I think that, maybe some people are thinking, oh, I can just jump on this myself, but it's very complex, and mental illness is very complex. So if you want to just briefly touch on that.
Yeah, no, it's a really important topic. I think for people who just want to lose a few pounds and do a keto diet, it's fine. You don't need to talk to your doctor. You don't need to get medical supervision. Just try it out. Worst that's going to happen is you're probably, you may not lose weight. Most people lose weight, but that's the worst that's going to happen is, oh, I didn't lose so much weight. If you have like very mild depression or anxiety disorders that are not impairing your ability to function, that are not life-threatening in any way whatsoever, meaning self-injury, suicidal thoughts, any of that, I think it's fine for you to go and try it. But again, almost 50% of the US population has some of that. So I don't want to exclude everyone.
Right.
But it's a serious mental disorder. And when I say serious, I mean serious incapacitating symptoms that prevent you from functioning in the world normally. Hallucinations, delusions, suicidality, out of control substance use, out of control eating disorders, other things that we know can be life-threatening. You need a mental health clinician, period. You deserve a mental health clinician, even though it's almost impossible to find one. Please keep trying to find one. Find one, get one. Why? Because you have a really serious life-threatening, disabling disorder. You deserve competent medical care. You deserve that. We shouldn't have to earn it, but it is, in my mind, even though healthcare is not a right in the United States, I feel like you have a right to competent medical treatment for your serious illness. The reason I think it's so critically important to do this treatment with somebody is because the ketogenic diet is a very powerful treatment. Make no mistake about it. And powerful treatments sometimes come with side effects too. And I think in the very early days, the keto adaptation phase in particular, I have seen some people's symptoms get worse before they get better. And the way that I at least have come to understand that is that if your brain is struggling to function properly with just it can't really use glucose very effectively, and then you cut out glucose from your diet altogether, it can kind of like pull the rug out from under you. And even normal people who are just using this treatment, this diet for weight loss, and I said normal, let me just say mentally healthy people, whatever, I didn't mean to be offensive with that statement, but even they will sometimes say, oh my God, I don't feel well, I feel dizzy, lightheaded, I feel weak, I'm starving all the time, I feel like I've got the flu, or I feel like something's going on. So even people who, as far as we can tell, don't have a problem with glucose hypometabolism in their brains, even they can have those symptoms. And so people with mental illness, by definition, their brain isn't functioning properly some of the time. And so they are even in a more vulnerable state. And I think when you induce them on the ketogenic diet, people just need to be given accurate information, and they need to have an ally who's going to be there to support them and make sure things are safe. Make sure if their symptoms do get worse, that they've got someone they can call, that you can come up with a safety plan. You might have to back off on the initiation of the diet initially. You may have to say, wait, oh, this is out of control. Let's maybe do a gradual induction. Let's maybe slowly reduce carbs over the next month and then try to get into that way. Or maybe we're going to use a ketone supplement to augment this and try to help you through it. Or maybe we're going to use MCT oil, or maybe we're going to do other things. But there are lots of interventions to think about. Certainly, if you're working with a physician or a nurse practitioner, they might want to check labs, make sure your electrolytes are okay, make sure other things are okay, because those can play a role in you not feeling well and not doing well. The other reason I think it's really important is because even for people who get through that induction phase well, and then they do really well on the diet, one of the things that I've seen almost across the board is that if the diet really works for you, if you're one of the lucky people and you get an almost complete remission of your symptoms, number one, you're going to want to come off your medications. Please don't do that on your own. I can tell you now, even when I've seen the ketogenic diet be extraordinarily powerful, it is not powerful enough to prevent the devastation of just stopping your meds cold turkey. It is not.
Right. No.
It is not powerful enough to stop the devastation. So do not stop your meds cold turkey. Make sure you work with a healthcare professional to taper off in a safe, gradual, effective way. But then the other thing is that when people think they've been cured, they want to test the waters. They want to see, well, I think I'm cured, so I think I can eat pizza now and be fine. And like, I've been on this diet for 3 months. Maybe I feel cured, so I want to see like what happens. Almost across the board, everybody does this, and they have a cheat day or a cheat weekend. And so, if you're just trying to lose weight, well, you just gain a few pounds over the weekend and you might feel sluggish or something, and then you get back on the wagon. If you're trying to treat your schizophrenia or bipolar disorder and you have a cheat weekend, you can become floridly psychotic or manic or suicidally depressed within hours or days.
Wow.
And somebody better be there to pick up the pieces and help you navigate that. Because if they're not, if you don't have a clinician who's completely on board with this treatment program, what's going to happen? You're hopefully not going to end up dead, but that's one thing that could happen, is you're going to end up dead for some reason because your symptoms are really serious and life-threatening. Or more than likely, you're going to end up in the hospital. What are they going to do in the hospital? They're going to load you up with lots of medications. They're going to tell you, what the hell were you doing that dangerous ketogenic diet for? That's what made you so sick. In fact, I want to point this out because that's what will happen. And I want to just point out, no, it wasn't the ketogenic diet that made you sick. It was going off an effective treatment that made you so sick. But the doctors in the hospital won't see it that way. They will see it as, you were doing this ketogenic diet for the last 3 months, and then you ate pizza, and look at you, you're a mess. It must be that diet. That diet was really dangerous. Don't ever do that again. And then not only will you not have an effective treatment, not only will you be way set back, not only will you have the trauma of being hospitalized again, but you will be on more medication than you probably ever were. And so you don't want to go down that road. Please get help. Please have an ally, a medical ally who's going to help you through this, keep you safe. The other thing is, as you said, it's a complex treatment and you have to know what you're doing. I just described the patient who had very trace ketones, didn't get better. If I had access to just live meetings with him, I would have been measuring his blood ketones. And based on that information, I would have been doing, at least attempting to do a much more rigorous version of the diet with him. But again, resources were limited. I didn't have access. But those kinds of things are really important. And a lot of, if you're trying to treat a serious disorder, you want to get better as soon as possible. So don't waste your time trying to reinvent the wheel. Don't waste your time trying to learn this complex medical treatment all by yourself. Like, go to a professional who knows how to do this and let them help you. And it's not that you're going to just passively obey them and do it. I don't mean it that way, but let them help you. Let them be an ally. Let them be a partner with you so that you can recover your health and so that they can be helpful. And so that if you do get into trouble, they can be there to help support you and get you through it and keep you out of the hospital and keep you off of lots of meds and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you said it so well. It's so incredibly important. I mean, when you're dealing with something like a serious mental illness, I mean, it's almost like you're speaking from experience with these sort of potential scenarios that can happen. And I think it's important for people to hear that. And it's different for somebody maybe just trying the diet because they've heard about it and they want to maybe lose a little weight. And it's very different when you're dealing with something like a psychiatric disorder or whatnot. So thank you for sharing that insight because I think it's hugely important. And for those looking for resources, please tell everybody where we can find you. We'll be following along closely because I know you have all kinds of good things like a book and a movement coming out down the pipeline. But where can people find you if they want to learn more about your work or just metabolic therapy for mental health?
So the best place to find me and my work is my website, Chris Palmer, MD, all one word, chrispalmermd.com. And there you can get some of the resources, some of the publications that I've written, both for medical journals, but also for things like Psychology Today, which is free, accessible, written in plain English, so that you don't have to be a medical professional to understand them. I've got other resources listed on the website. For those interested in just kind of the medical application of the ketogenic diet for brain health, even mental health, but also brain health more broadly, strongly encourage or plug the Charlie Foundation. Charlie Foundation or Matthew's Friends in the UK, both of them have wonderful resources, including referrals to ketogenic dietitians who can be a part of your treatment team. And so if you're working with a psychiatrist and your psychiatrist says, I'm open to you trying this, but I don't know nothing about the ketogenic diet, so you're gonna have to figure that out on your own, you can go to the Charlie Foundation and find a ketogenic dietitian. And that person can be a partner with you and your psychiatrist. And that person will be able to implement the treatment, and that person will partner with your psychiatrist even, and work with that person to get lab monitoring, and they'll work closely with your clinician to make sure that if you're improving, if you're not improving, if they need to tweak the diet, all of that.
Right. No, those are great resources. And your website is just phenomenal. You keep it up to date. You've got all your new publications and everything. We keep close tabs on it. So thank you for sharing that. And as always, it is such a pleasure to sit down and chat with you about this hugely important topic. There's a lot of work to do. There are a lot of barriers that we have to break down. But with people like you doing such good work, it would not be possible. So thank you again for sitting down with me today. And we're excited to follow along with your work.
Thank you, Victoria. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you all for watching. Make sure you comment below if you have any additional questions, and we'll definitely be checking back in with Dr. Palmer soon. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.